Well, hello, everyone. My name is Polly Mitchell-Guthrie, and I work at SAS, and I'm joined by Kathy Green from North Carolina State's Institute for Advanced Analytics, as well as her colleague Laura Laudry, and we'll tell you about ourselves in just a minute, but first we wanted to tell you what we're going to tell you about today. So first, as I said, we're going to tell you who we are, who's talking to you today. We're going to talk to you about the CAP and ACAP program so you can know what's involved, and then we're going to talk to you about the benefits and why your students might be interested in getting involved and why you might want to get involved. And then we'll tell you about the partnership program that we have designed so that you can understand how you could get involved. And then we'll be happy to entertain any questions you may have. So just a little bit about myself. The main thing I want to say as it relates to our time together this afternoon is that I've been involved in the certification initiative from Inform since the beginning. There was a task force created in 2011, and I served on that initial task force, and then served in a leadership role as the vice chair for several years, and then I'm the immediate past chair for the last 2 years. And while I was chair, led the ad hoc committee we set up to determine whether or not we should set up this Associate Certified Analytics Professional program that we're going to talk to you about today. Laura?
Hello, and I am Laura Laudry. I work at North Carolina State University with the Institute for Advanced Analytics and have been working with the Institute since it started. I am the academic program manager, and I actually come to this position from an IT computer science background. Kathy?
Yep. So I'm Kathy Green, and I'm the Associate Director at North Carolina State University's Institute for Advanced Analytics. I have also been with the Institute since the very beginning, back in 2006. Come from a rather unusual background in that I have a master's degree in library and information science, and did that for about 15 years before joining Michael Rappa. I get asked about that fairly often, and I tend to point to libraries as the original database, so I don't think it's that unrelated. But my job at the Institute is admissions and chief cook and bottle washer in terms of financials and human resources. So that's a little bit about me.
And I can tell you that both of them have been very modest. Kathy was with Michael from the practically day one in getting this program off the ground, so many of you all have heard or met Michael Rappa, who started the Institute for Advanced Analytics, but Kathy was there with him virtually from the beginning, and Laura is the one that keeps the things humming on a day-to-day basis so the students have a great experience. So they're here because they have a lot of understanding of the student and the organizational perspective.
Thank you, Polly. I'm blushing.
So this is Laura, and let me tell you that we have been a partner with ACAP-CAP for a while now, and it has been great for us. You can see the quote from Dr. Rappa about how valuable we find certifications in general, and we're happy to add this certification. In fact, we successfully piloted ACAP last year with about 18 students, so our MSA class of 15-16 had about 18 students take the certification, and it was so successful that we actually are going to deploy it to all of our students this year. So MSA 17 class, all of them will have the opportunity to take the ACAP if they'd like to.
Thank you, Laura. And I'll add that Michael Rappa was on that initial task force with me back in 2011, and then involved in some other steps I'll talk about later, and he's come back. We're grateful that he's come back and joined the board just last year. So the program has been a strong supporter from the beginning. Okay, so let me get to the what part. I want to tell you a little bit about what CAP is. It stands for Certified Analytics Professional, and it is the leading certification for practitioners of analytics around the world. What you see on the clipboard here are what we sometimes call the 5 E's. And so first I'm going to tell you about CAP, and then I'm going to tell you about ACAP, which is our real reason for being here today. So what makes up the CAP is these 5 E's, as I said. What you'll see smack in the middle is the exam, and that's what most people think of when they think of certification, is that you have to take an exam. But it really starts with a combination of what's at the top and the bottom of the clipboard, which is education and experience. The reason that's important is that when we created this certification, we were very clear that Many university programs like the ones you all represent existed already, although some of you may be newer to the game, but at any rate, there were many in existence, and there were plenty of ways for people to go get education in the field of analytics, but we wanted a way to differentiate or to distinguish the practice of analytics. So that's why there's a combination of education and experience that's required to get the full cap. So for example, if you have a master's degree in a related field, such as a master's in analytics or computer science, something like that, it requires 3 years of experience. Whereas at the opposite end of the spectrum, if you have a bachelor's, quote unquote, only a bachelor's in an unrelated field, it would require more experience, 7 years of experience. And so when we created the exam and the things associated with it, we created questions that we thought you would only be able to pass if you'd actually been in practice, not if you had just studied the material, but you'd actually implement it in a practitioner role. The other 2 E's that are part of the CAP certification are ethics. We believe it's important that you have significant power when you're exercising the practice of analytics, and we want to make sure that you do so within ethical means, and so there's a code of ethics we have people sign as part of the CAP. And the 5th one is effectiveness, and that stands for the effective practice of analytics, and it's really a proxy for the soft skills. So again, what we recognize is that if you're going to be engaged in the practice of analytics, we all know that a brilliant model is only as good as someone's ability to articulate it to other people, and so effectiveness, we don't test with an exam. That's hard to do. We have people, candidates must have a letter from somebody who's worked with them that can testify to their effectiveness or their soft skills. So then where does the ACAP come in? What happened is we began hearing from a number of the Masters in Analytics programs who said, we understand that you have an experience requirement, but we have students who we put through our programs. We believe that they have learned everything they would need to know to pass your exam, and we have very intentionally created a practice-based educational experience, so we believe they have that component as well in their educational experience that should allow them to pass the exam. So even if they do not have the requisite years of experience, can you create something for us? So we debated this for a while because of our strong belief originally in the importance of practice, but concluded that there aren't many outstanding programs like the institutes that have incorporated that enough of a practice-based experience that was a fair and relevant question. So we decided to settle on the 3 E's for the associate CAP. These are for people who do not yet have the years of experience, and I want to be clear that I spoke to the Institute for Advanced Analytics students last week about this program, and not all of this, most of the students are shaving. In fact, some of them have been shaving for a number of years, and my point of that joke is that some of them do come in having had robust professional careers. They're transitioning into analytics. So the key around the experience is that you must have had a minimum of 3 years of experience in an analytics-related job to qualify for the full CAP. So the associate CAP is for people who are either early in their career or early in their analytics career and transitioning into it. So it requires that students be able to pass the exam. They must commit to that code of ethics, and they must have passed a master's degree in one of these related fields. We wanted to make sure that the exam itself, although we assumed that it would be difficult for people who did not have experience to pass, we wanted to test that theory, and that's why we partnered with North Carolina State, University of Denver, and a handful of other programs to put some of their students through the exam and see if they could pass, and enough of them did that we were confident that if you've been through a strong program, you've been a good student, you've paid attention, you've participated in the practice-oriented components of your program, you do have the opportunity to, or you have the experience necessary that you should be able to pass the exam. So let's talk about what's on the exam. That's the next step. So when you're creating a certification, one of the steps you do is convene a job task, and you do a job task analysis. In this case, what this means is that we convened a group of subject matter experts. This is another place where Dr. Michael Rappa was gracious enough to help us, along with Arnie Greenland, who I believe at the time was at IBM. Some of you may know Arnie's at the University of Maryland now, and other people who were expert practitioners in the area of analytics. We locked them in a room for 2 days and said, if you are an analytics practitioner, what are the kinds of domains you must have knowledge in? What are the tasks you perform on a daily basis? And what are the pieces of knowledge you need in order to be able to perform those tasks in those domains? You can see a summary here, and what I want to call your attention to is that it really reflects the full spectrum of analytics practice. So it's very important to start out and make sure you're identifying what is the business problem, who are the stakeholders, and then you have to convert that problem into an analytics problem, make sure it can be modeled as such. Then we certainly all know that 60 to 80% of the work involves wrangling the data, wrestling it to the ground. Then we assess whether or not someone can understand how to select the right methodology. Is this a forecasting problem, or is it a linear programming problem, or is it both? Can they actually build the models? Do they understand the challenges around deploying models? And then finally, with model lifecycle maintenance, do they understand that models degrade over time and how you monitor them and adjust them as needed? Each of these domains has a series of tasks associated with it, and then each of those tasks is broken even further in the form of the whole thing envisioned an outline. So it covers in great detail. Most of it is on the exam. There are some places where some of the areas, soft skills is one I mentioned. There are others that do not lend themselves well to an exam, but the vast majority of this is tested on the exam. So why should your students consider this program?
I'll tell you. But what benefits there are for the students is that it allows the students to stand out to potential employers. Everyone knows employers love the certifications. They love the SAP certifications, Tableau certifications, and this industry certification is also well liked by employers. It demonstrates knowledge of full end-to-end analytics processes. This is a way to let our students and their potential employers know that the education that the students have participated in is a valuable one, that their education actually aligns with industry standards. Also, it illustrates a commitment to professionalism and standards, which we feel is very important. And we work with our students, for instance, to join professional organizations while they're still here in the school, and to work on not only their technical skills, but also their soft skills as well. Perhaps, Polly, you'd like to add some insights from other institutions?
Yes, so another thing that I would suggest is that many of you may equip your students to be part of the recruiting process, and when they're negotiating their salaries, which may be especially new for the younger ones, talking about ways they can differentiate themselves and indicate that they have a stronger argument for justifying the salary they desire. Certification, we believe, is another thing they can point to that indicates that, as opposed to other students who may not have sat for the certification, they have a third-party independent verification that they actually learn and paid attention in class, and that should be worth rewarding with a salary.
And we are collecting data on that now. Since last year was the first year which we deployed the ACAP exam, we don't have any data to say at this point, but we certainly will continue to monitor this. And as you know, we post everything to the webpage, so stay in tune and we'll find out.
Thank you, Laura. So I don't know if Andrew was, I believe, Andrew, you had signed up, but Andrew Uberchevsky from the University of Denver was another one of the launch partners and one of the ones who had some of his students take the exam. And he's given us another statement from his experience. What I want to highlight from what he said here is that, you know, as I said earlier, it's a practice-based exam. We believe that's very important. You learn that on the job. But for those students who really can distinguish themselves by being able to pass a practice-based exam, this allows them to differentiate themselves from those other programs. I was in a career panel session on analytics on Friday, and one of the students said that she was in an online program, and there were no practice-based components that she could tell to her program, and she was having difficulty interviewing for jobs because people wanted to know what experience she had, and she had no experience in analytics and couldn't even point to projects she'd worked on. So that practice-based component is important, and a student who has passed this certification can indicate that they have passed a practice-based exam. We're delighted that not only North Carolina State and the University of Denver signed up as early launch partners, but we had friends from Oklahoma State, Arizona State, UT Knoxville, University of Cincinnati, and the University of British Columbia's Sauder School of Business all joined us early on to say, we think this is a great program. We're promoting this to our students. And as Laura indicated, remember last year we really only did a soft launch with a few programs where we allowed their students to take the exam to test and see if it was relevant. So this academic year is the first full academic year where we've been able to have programs that could participate fully, and these are the ones that signed on early on and said, we're in, sign us up. And that does lead me to one other point I should highlight, which is the reason the calendar year or the academic year matters is that students are not eligible if they are not eligible for the full cap and they're signed up for the associate cap. They have to get that. They have to pass that master's degree. There's a window that opens within 90 days of graduation where their eligibility begins. And so, if once the clicker starts 90 days out from graduation, they're eligible to begin. So this fall, nobody could have signed up anyhow. Esma, who is at Arizona State and was a member of our board in the last year, has indicated that the reason she believes this is so exciting and why she was happy to have Arizona State sign on as a partner is that she believes that it's a way to demonstrate to the field that these are an elite group of certified professionals. As we all know, there's been a proliferation in these, not only master's in analytics programs, but Coursera, certificates, boot camps, all kinds of ways people can go out and indicate that they have gotten some education and training in data science and analytics, but how do you indicate that you're a member of an elite group that can differentiate yourself with a certification and show that you're staying up to date with the most up-to-date approaches even after you've graduated?
And I'll jump in on this one. This is Kathy. The benefits for universities are obviously, based on everything that we've talked about so far, creating added value for the students and the faculty, promoting students with mastery of the whole process, making sure that we're all on the same page regarding industry standard practices, and continuing to enhance the reputation of an analytics program. Something just to kind of follow up on what Polly said a minute ago about all the various channels there are for getting analytics education, whether it's a typical university program or a boot camp or a MOOC or something like that. This is a point I often make to prospective applicants regarding prerequisites for our program when they ask, well, do I have to take a prerequisite for a grade? Can I just pick it up online? And I usually make the point that universities aren't in the business of selling knowledge. The knowledge is pretty much out there and freely available. What they are in the business of is certifying that their graduates have the knowledge in order to be successful in the field. They do that by offering, a degree or sort of providing a degree at the end of a fairly rigorous process of education and testing. But then the ACAP adds an additional layer of knowledge certification from an independent third party that basically sort of validates that the university has imparted to students the skills necessary to do the job and to be competent and to certify mastery.
Thank you, Kathy. And I saw that somebody had asked a question about what it means to be an educational partner, and I'm just about to talk about that right now. So we realized that the Masters in Analytics programs represent a unique group, and so we wanted to offer a special group package and program for you all because you're different than the individual applicants that make up much of the full CAP credential. So we've come up with a cost-efficient packaging structure, a bunch of resources that can make it easier for students to prepare, and as Kathy and Laura have just talked about, we believe that participating in this program would give you all a chance to highlight the credibility of your program, that your students have learned enough to pass this exam, and that you're therefore part of an elite group. So let me explain that in a little more detail. The fee to pass the ACAP is $195, and that also includes a free Informs membership, as well as participation in one special interest group. And one of the things I want to mention about this is that before we came up with this package, Michael Rappa had Informs invoice him for all of the students in his program to become members of Informs, because one of the things that he felt strongly about is that one of the things he wanted to inculcate in the students is that part of being a professional is participating in a professional association, and Informs is the leading one for analytics and the right fit for his students. In terms of special interest groups, one of the ones I would highlight is the Analytics Society. I will say I'm not a neutral party here. I'm a past secretary in the last couple of years, and in the last year we had a special, but here's an example of one of the things we offer. So in the last year, and I hope we'll do it again this year, we had a special mentorship program for students who attended the Informs Business Analytics and Operations Research Conference we hold every year in April. It's a practitioner-based conference where we had one member of the Analytics Society agree to be a mentor for a student participating in the Informs Professional Colloquium, which is another great program I'd encourage you all to look up for your students. Another question that came up last week when I spoke to the students at the Institute was, what's the fee to retake the exam if I don't pass it the first time? Well, we certainly hope that nobody ends up having to ask that question in reality, but if they do, they can take it at half price if they're participating in your program. And that conference that I just mentioned, the Informs Conference on Business Analytics, students that are part of this program get a discount to participate in that conference, and that's a great value. And I know I've worked with a number of students who got their jobs through participating in that conference, because there is a job fair and great networking opportunities. You'll see the note at the bottom that we do ask that you have a minimum of 10 candidates per year to participate in this partnership package, but for most of you, I believe that shouldn't be an issue. And a few more things here. For the students in your program, there's a special Informs Continuing Education class, and this focuses on the practice-based skills. So if that's an area where you feel, depending on what's covered in your program, you can see what gaps may or may not exist. If you feel there's any gaps around practice, this could be a good value for your students. One way to find out if there are any gaps is the access to the Extended Job Task Analysis, or JTA as we call it for short. This is the outline I mentioned earlier, where we say we put a bunch of people in the room and said, what does a practitioner do all day long? It's very detailed in terms of what we believe they should do, and therefore what we cover on the exam. And so the best way to determine whether or not your students would be prepared in terms of the content you've taught them in your program to sit for the exam is to review this job task analysis, and you would have a chance to do that in more detail. We offer a version through our website, but if you want to get it in even more detail, you can get it through this program. And of course, we offer you the chance to use the logo in your marketing materials. So I'm looking at the questions here. I think that answers what does it mean to be an educational partner. Somebody else asked whether students who complete an 18-hour certificate program can sit for the exam. I'm going to have to defer that one to Jeff or Christy or Louise. And if you all are speaking, you're on mute. The question is, can students who complete an 18-hour certificate program, and so many of these, for example, Oklahoma State, until they fairly recently had an official master's program, had taught many of these course subjects, but had students complete a certificate program versus a full master's degree. So the question is, can students who complete a certificate program versus a full master's, are they eligible for this program? Not hearing an answer from the staff, so unless they chime in, I'm going to suggest that be something we look into and follow up on.
Whenever we had questions here at the Institute, we got very quick and good answers from Louise, the certification manager, so perhaps that question could also be emailed to her. She was very responsive.
I'm looking at, yes, so the information I'm getting is, I'm seeing some notes here are that the Analytics Certification Board would need to review that question. It's a great question, and we don't have access. You know, we would have to review that. We've not covered that up to this point. Somebody's saying they don't have audio access. I believe in order to ask questions, it appears that you perhaps have to ask via, there must be a chat window somewhere. I think what you all see is different.
At the bottom.
Yeah, it's at the bottom of the presentation.
And another question is, can an MBA program with a focus on business analytics be considered for this program? Yes, a business program would be an eligible degree. The question that I would highlight for your students to consider is whether or not you've covered enough business analytics for your students to be able to pass, and that would be where I would encourage you all as program leaders to review the job task analysis and see whether or not if a student has gone through your MBA program, taken all the classes in your business analytics concentration, do you believe they would have learned sufficient information to be able to pass the exam? I'm looking
I think
for...
Louise's contact information is 1 or 2 slides on from where we are now, too. So we will be sharing the contact information for the certification manager.
Right. And we will certainly send out a follow-up email after this with that contact information. So other questions? Okay, so the way to get if you want the information now, the way to contact Louise or find more detailed questions would be to send an email to certification. That's with the ION at the end, not certificate, but certification at informs.org. And another question is, students can only sit for the exam within 90 days from graduation. That is just when the window opens. The window, I'm forgetting the details. Staff's going to have to fill me in on when the window closes. But the 90-day window that I mentioned is only when it opens. In other words, they don't have to wait until they've completed the master's degree to sit for the exam. They can take it at the end of their degree program. Okay, then
I can add the statistics.
Go ahead.
The statistics that we gathered last year for the Institute when we have a May graduation, and the students, 72% of the students said April was the right time to take it. So they really need to go through all the program and have time to study for this before they sit for it. So they said mostly April, which is right before graduation. Just a few said right at graduation time, and there was a handful, 38% that, less than 38% that said in March, which is almost 2 months before graduation.
And I would encourage you all as programs, you naturally want the most number of students to participate and take the exam and pass the exam. When the material is fresh in their minds and you have them hot in your hands and your grasp is also, of course, the best time to have them take it. So that 90-day window is just when it opens, but it's probably the best window overall. Somebody asked, is there a cost to becoming a partner? And the answer is no, there's no cost to becoming a partner and allowing us to have you participate with these benefits. The cost, of course, is for the individual students for the exam, although we can make arrangements, as we did with North Carolina State, to invoice you all en masse. In other words, instead of having each individual student sign up and be invoiced, in some cases the programs have agreed to subsidize or pay that cost for the students, and when that is the case, we are able to invoice you directly for those students. Another question is, do you commit to reaching are the partnership fees paid up front, or do we just commit to reaching the 10-student minimum and then have the students pay you when you take the exam?
Yeah.
It's a good question. I think the short answer is that you don't have to pay up front. So it's not like you have to have 10 students times $195 and pay us that fee up front. whether or not you have the students pay individually or you pay for them, as long as you have a 10-student minimum, we can work with you on those details of what's going to work best for your program as well as what staff can manage the best. Here's another question, and I'm going to have to rely on Jeff or Christy to answer this one. Somebody asked if there was going to be a session on certification at the analytics meeting in Vegas so that people can learn more. So I hope everybody knows about the Master's Degree in Analytics program meeting that's going to be held on April 1st, the day before the start of the Business Analytics Conference. It's a great opportunity for you all. If you don't know about that, or if you were on the fence, I encourage you to participate. And Jeff or Louise are going to have, or Christy are going to have to answer whether there's going to be a session on this at that event. And now I'm waiting for them to type. There will be information about CAP at the conference. I'm not sure whether it's going to be specifically at that particular meeting just for the analytics program directors, where we have always done something about certification at the conference. And so the short answer is, if you come to Vegas, you will have a chance to learn more about this program, and stay tuned. And there is also going to be another thing that might interest you in more detail, is that we have something called the Analytics Body of Knowledge. So if you think of the job task analysis I mentioned earlier with the domains, the tasks, and the areas of knowledge required as an outline, think of the analytics body of knowledge as the full explanation of this material. It's that body of knowledge behind those domains and tasks. We are creating that. It's a common thing you do when you're setting up a certification. There will be a session about that at the conference in Las Vegas. Looking at some of these more questions. The Business Analytics Conference, when is that? It's April 2nd through 4th, and we can make sure that in the follow-up email we send to all the people who participated in this webinar that we have information about the conference in that email, as well as the Masters in Analytics program meeting. Let's see. Going through the questions here. Somebody's saying they're confused about eligibility to sit for the exam. Been telling all our students to plan on sitting for the exam and earn the ACAP. Didn't realize there was a minimum requirement to sit for the exam. Can anyone sit for the exam regardless of experience? And they're confused about the 90-day window. So I'm going to do my best to answer the question, and whoever you are, you said maybe you should reach out to Louise, and if I confuse you further, I would definitely say reach out to Louise, because she's way less confusing than me. So the short answer is that if your students are in a Master's in Analytics program, then they are certainly eligible for the exam. The 3 E's of eligibility for the ACAP are the exam, the Code of Ethics, assuming they're willing to sign that, and that they can pass the exam. But just to be eligible, they need to sit for the exam, sign the Code of Ethics, and be in a Master's program in Analytics or a very closely related degree program, maybe data science or something like that. The eligibility window for when they can sit for the exam begins 90 days from the date of their graduation. So the intent behind that is that we didn't want students sitting for the exam in the fall when, as Laura mentioned earlier, they haven't learned enough material or it hasn't gelled enough for them to be in the best position to be able to pass the exam. So if they're in your program, they're eligible to sit for the exam as soon as 3 months before graduation. That's when the window of eligibility begins. Let's see. Somebody's asking, you have a small but growing analytics program. What if you don't meet the 10 minimum? Do we roll back to regular pricing? I'm going to say that I don't know the answer to that. The answer is probably yes, but there may be creative things you can do. Part of the reason we want to get to 10 is because there's some administrative costs to running the program, and we're trying to encourage group pricing. So thinking out loud here, one of the things you could do is encourage a group of students as well as some local analytics practitioners. So that might be one way you could get to a group of 10. And if you could reach that group of 10, qualify for the discount. But I'm going to have you send you all to the famous Louise, who is our certification program manager, at the other end of the email for certification@informs.org to answer that great question. And then here's somebody who's probably Louise clarifying for me that the window opens 90 days prior to graduation, and then there's a 90-day period or another 90-day window after graduation where the student must provide their transcript. So I neglected to say that part of the eligibility, the confirmation of your eligibility that you have the degree is a transcript, of course. And so you won't have a transcript prior to graduation. So you can sit for the exam 90 days prior to graduation or any time in that window, and then you have up to 90 days after graduation to confirm that eligibility by providing your transcript. These are great questions. Keep them coming if you have any more. Any additional questions? All right, going once. Going twice. Oh, here we go. How many times can a student retake the exam? That is a great question, and I was asked that last week. I don't know the exact answer to that. I can tell you that you can retake the exam at half price if you're part of this program. And what I mentioned as part of my answer is that there may be a point of the answer to this question, how many times can a student retake the exam, may answer itself by the point of diminishing returns, meaning it may be that the student would get discouraged before we'd have them time out. All right, more questions here. Somebody wants to know if writing skills, the ability to articulate the meaning or implications of analysis to a somebody wants to know
likely non-technical audience.
Yeah. That is, in terms of, I don't believe we cover that on the exam. I believe the main way we would cover that is in the effectiveness and that is something that is not required of them for the ACAP. That's required of them to reach the full cap. So the sort of trajectory that we might say could happen is your student goes through your goes through your program, gets their transcript, sits for the exam, passes the exam, sends the transcript in, signs the code of ethics, they become an ACAP. And then by the time the clock ticks and they've reached the required 3 years of experience that would be required for them with a master's degree in a related field, the last thing they'd have to demonstrate is the effectiveness, which is the soft skills, and the way they do that is by having somebody they have worked with in a substantial manner who can send a letter in testifying to their soft skills. There's not a writing component to the exam. Naturally, they need to have the skills to be able to read and comprehend the exam sufficiently.
I'll say that 100% of our students last year in the trial, they used the study guide, which ACAP will provide, and they were very successful by going what was in the study guide. It was somewhat helpful to look at the job task analysis for terminology, because while they might have known the concept, they perhaps didn't call it what ACAP called it. And then the rest, they just Googled what they were interested in based on what they didn't know out of the study guide. So in addition to, obviously, the education that they received in the Master of Science in Analytics program, it seems as though for most of them, just looking at that study guide was the only additional bit that they had to do.
Okay, we have some questions about the exam itself, and the answer to the question is that it is a 100-question exam. It's all multiple choice. You're allowed to bring in a 4-function calculator, and we deliver it all via computer these days. We use a criterion testing center. You have 3 hours to sit for the exam, so it does require the ability to read questions closely and comprehend them, but it is multiple choice. Somebody asked if students have to provide a transcript even before they graduate. No. I assume that universities don't release transcripts until you've graduated, so they don't have to provide that until they graduate. We do have clarification that you are allowed to take the exam. If you don't pass the first time, you're allowed to take it a total of 3 times before you would need to reapply. And we're being asked about the pass rate for the exam. Several people asked about that. While I'm letting staff chime in on that, I'm going to talk about another question we have around the continuing education requirement. It's a great question. We do require that. We require that you accrue a total of 30 professional development units over the course of the 3 years. So for students sitting for going from the ACAP to CAP, you'd have to accrue those 30, or for people who have the CAP and are recertifying after the 3-year window, you have to do it every 3 years. It's 30. We give you a program online, like a place on our website where you can log your professional development units, and the variety of things you can do to qualify for achieving your professional development units are pretty generous. You get a certain number of them just for working in an analytics-related job. You also get some for things like professional development. Have you gone to a training or a conference? Have you spoken somewhere? Have you volunteered for your professional association? The intent was that if you are actually working in the practice of analytics and maintaining yourself to a high standard as an analytics practitioner by attending trainings and volunteering, things like that, you should have no problem achieving those professional development units. Okay, so the pass rate is about 70%. And staff are highlighting for me, we're so generous, we give you 5 professional development units as long as you're working in an analytics-related job. I will say if you go to the Institute for Advanced Analytics, you pass the exam, and then you decide to go become a ballerina, you're not going to get your 5 professional development units. It could happen, or if you could be a hairstylist, we have had the opposite happen. In other words, if you're not working in an analytics-related job for a period of time, you've decided to go hike around the world, whatever you go find yourself, you would not be accruing those professional development units. But the assumption is that most people who want to maintain certification are working in an analytics-related job, and then they get 5 years of professional development units just for that alone. So if you think about that, if you do the math, if you get 5 per year times 3, that's 15. That's half your professional development units right there just for being employed. The question is, somebody asked another question about the transcript. Are all students required to provide a transcript? Yes, for both the CAP and the ACAP, there is an education requirement in order for us to confirm that you actually did get the degree and you aren't just telling us you got the degree. We do need to see a transcript. Somebody wants to know if the pass rate is the same for ACAP and CAP. The short answer to that is that we really actually don't know, in the sense that as both Laura and I mentioned earlier, we really only did a beta test last year, so we don't have enough data to know whether this year, which is our first full year, I think we only had 30 ACAPs right now, because they were really just people who received that as part of the beta test. So this will be the first year where we will see whether people with the ACAP pass the exam at the same rate. What I can tell you is that we've done some analysis on, is there a correlation between the pass rate and the number of years of experience that you have, and there is a correlation, and it's exactly what we would expect, which is that there tends to be a little lower pass rate for people with less years of experience, higher pass rate for those with more years of experience. So But again, I would highlight what Laura said, which is that there's students who reviewed the study guide just to make sure they were sort of on board with the terminology. In fact, I seem to recall, Laura, one of your students said they didn't even have to study because they felt like they'd learned everything they needed in the program.
There's always outliers.
What we, and certainly not even you as program directors, can speak to is how well the students have paid attention. We all wish.
And what they come to, if they come in with experience too, it makes a big difference.
Right.
I generally don't tell that to the rest of the students, though.
The way to answer the question, if you're concerned about the pass rate for your students, I would say is, first of all, you know the how high a bar you're setting for admissions. That's one thing you could consider. And secondly, is to do a review of that job task analysis to see what we say we are going to cover on the exam. We also provide a study guide as well as sample questions. All that would be good data you could review to see, again, whether or not you believe that your students are prepared with the material you provide. Laura also mentioned that what they come to the program with. I can tell you that for the full CAP, we certainly expect, since we're covering a certain degree of breadth, most people come in with more depth in some areas, so perhaps they have a master's in statistics but never took any formal operations research classes and have picked up that on the job. We would expect that somebody like that would need to review that kind of the material in the study guide, in the job task analysis related to operations research more prior to the exam, and that they may well pass those questions at a lower rate, but we would expect that they should be able to pass all the statistics questions. One question is the exam identical for ACAP and CAP? Yes. It is a single practice-based exam, and the reason we created the Associate Certified Analytics Professional Program is because of people like you all saying to us, our students have learned the material. They should be able to pass this material because we've had a focus on a practice-based orientation in our degree program. So we have them sit for the same exam. What is different and what is missing is the years of experience and the effectiveness, that they are not having anybody yet testify to the fact that they have the soft skills. Although certainly some of your students probably do.
I'll add, too, that the CAP is not software specific at all. So
Thank you.
It doesn't count on a particular type of software being taught in your program.
Yeah, so I can speak to that as well, since I'm often asked about this, since I participate in the Analytics Certification Board in a vendor-neutral way. Although I work at SAS, I'm often asked about the difference between a SAS certification and the Informed certification. What I always say is that SAS certification tests whether or not you know how to do something like predictive modeling using SAS software, SAS Enterprise Miner. The analytics certification from Informs is evaluating whether or not you know how to do predictive modeling, regardless of the software involved. People are asking about obtaining a copy of the study guide. Yes, you can certainly get that. It's available on our website. If you look up Certified Analytics Professional, and you give us a few credentials, your name, email address, etc., you'll be able to register and download a copy of the study guide, as well as the other reference that I would highly recommend you take a look at, aside from the study guide, is the CAP handbook, or the Certified Analytics Professional Handbook, which answers a whole lot of these kinds of detailed questions and more. And people are asking if there's any programming language you should need to know for the exam, and as Laura and I both just said, no, it's vendor neutral. We do believe that selecting the right software for the job is something that a practitioner should know how to do, but we do not test for that on the exam. Other questions? These have been great questions. Right. It is 20 minutes after the hour. We've got 10 more minutes. We're happy to sit here and answer your questions, if there are any more.
There was one other thing that we surveyed our students who took the ACAP last year was there anything that they wish they knew ahead of time? And they said they wish they had paid attention to the fact that the exam takes 3 hours, and that they felt that this was very tiring. So be sure to be healthy and get a good night's sleep before you go.
Okay. Somebody made a comment that because this exam is vendor neutral, it's been likened to the PMP, the Project Management Program for Analytics, because it is software and vendor neutral. Somebody's asking, are programs that have a capstone project more successful? I'd say at this point we don't know because, again, we're in the beginning of the program. We don't have enough students that have gone through it yet to know. Certainly the more practice the students have had, the better. Hands down, I would say that is true. How they get that form of practice or experience, whether it be a capstone, a practicum, active case studies, contrast it with the opposite. If your students, if in your degree program they get a very strong foundation in theory, but they have primarily worked with clean data sets, toy problems, have not had to look at the entire analytics life cycle from framing the business problem all the way to modeling, deployment, and monitoring. If they've not had experience really trying to think about how do you understand that whole process, then they are in a less good shape to sit for the exam. Another question was, how long does it actually take? We'll give you 3 hours, and the answer is that most people do end up taking close to that 3 hours. You know, if you have, some of it's human nature. If you have 3 hours, some people just want to sit there and rethink about what they're, whether or not they're comfortable with all their questions. But most people do take close to the 3 hours. Question is, are there textbooks we recommend for the course? We do have a resource guide that we provide that is part of the study guide where we list some resources that we have relied upon or that we recommend we believe are foundational. We don't teach to the text, or rather the exam doesn't match a text per se, but in terms of resources that we believe would be good preparation, we do provide a list in the study guide. Any additional questions? Maybe you're busy filling out your email to certification@informs.org because you're wanting to sign up. So Informs is going to be developing an Introduction to Analytics course over the next year, and that could be another adjunct that may be a helpful preparation resource. Somebody said thank you, so for wherever you were that said thank you for the thank you. Your mama raised you right. Any more questions? It's 24 minutes past the hour. Somebody else's mama raised them right, I can tell. All right, so I spoke incorrectly about the Introduction to Analytics course. It's a CAP boot camp. So we're trying to condense a lot of the important material, do a quick overview, and put it into a boot camp format that we will be providing, and that could be another resource. All right, so somebody says that they sent an email to info@certifiedanalytics.org and it bounced back. I'm going to let staff answer that. I can definitely tell you if you send an email to certification@informs.org, that should get there. Yes, the best email to use is certification@informs.org. They just confirmed that. So that's you all were busy typing the wrong email. So let's have you busy typing the right email to certification@informs.org saying, how can you sign up for this program? Glad to clarify. Somebody thanked us for that. Thank you for the thank you. Are there any additional questions? Going once? At 26 minutes after the hour? Going twice? All right, 3 times. Well, you don't have to stop asking the questions now. You certainly may think of them later. As I said, we'll send out a follow-up email with some of the information we talked about. As long as and that will include the email address to ask additional questions, and that email address, to say it one more time, is certification with an ION at the end, certification@informs.org. But rest assured you'll get an email with follow-up information and a place to ask questions. And I want to thank Kathy and Laura for joining us today. They're in the middle of a very busy admissions and recruiting cycle, so it's gracious of them to take time out to speak to the value of this program. I think that speaks well to the value of the program to them, that they were willing to give up their time to share. And I want to thank all of you all for participating today. You've asked great questions. It's great to hear your enthusiasm. And I'm excited to be part of this initiative that is, among all of us, trying to create a crop of better prepared students to reach the market and help with this huge demand for analytical skills and help us make better decisions and ask better questions. So thank you, everyone, for your time today.